The rain was soft, the grave was open, and Hannah's hand was full of wet dirt. She stared down at the coffin. Her father's name, Walter James Bennett. The man the whole town said killed her mother. The man who ran the night she found her mom's body on the kitchen floor. She was 12 years old that night. She is 32 now, and in 20 years she has not cried once. She opened her hand. The dirt hit the wood, and she whispered the words she had practiced every single night for 2 decades. I hope hell is colder than what you did to Mom. She walked away from that grave believing it was finally over, believing she could finally breathe. Hey beautiful souls, welcome to Vicky Tale. If you're part of this family already, if you're subscribed, thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you're new here, welcome. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and share. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Let's begin. Hannah Bennett is 32 years old. She works the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital in a small town in Ohio, in the emergency room, where the lights never turn off and the pain never stops coming through the doors. She is the kind of nurse other nurses whisper about. Calm in a crisis, steady when the room is screaming. The kind of woman who can hold a stranger's hand while they take their last breath and not flinch, not look away, not let go until the heart monitor goes flat. The other nurses call her ice. Not in a mean way, in a respectful way, because nothing rattles Hannah. But what they don't know is that Hannah isn't strong because she was born strong. Hannah is strong because life beat the softness out of her before she ever got to keep it. By the time she was 13, she had already buried her mother, watched her father vanish, and become the only parent her baby brother had left in the world. She didn't get to be a child, she didn't get a sweet 16. She didn't get prom dresses or college dorm rooms or spring break trips with friends. While other girls were learning how to put on lipstick, Hannah was learning how to forge her aunt's signature on school permission slips so Daniel wouldn't get embarrassed. While other girls were dreaming about boys, Hannah was working 2 jobs after school, one at a diner, one cleaning offices at night so Daniel could have new sneakers when his old ones got too tight. She raised that boy, make no mistake about it. Her aunt may have given them a roof, but Hannah gave Daniel everything else. She packed his lunches. She helped him with his homework at the kitchen table while her own books sat closed on the floor. She taught him how to tie a tie before his first job interview. She sat in the front row of his high school graduation, clapping so hard her hands hurt, because their mother wasn't there to do it. And every single night after Daniel was asleep, Hannah would sit alone in the dark and remember. The kitchen floor, the blood, the note her mother supposedly wrote, and the empty chair where her father used to sit, doing taxes, humming along to her mother's church songs. The chair he ran from, the man he turned out to be. Daniel is 24 now, tall, kind, gentle in a way that always surprises people who meet him for the first time. And he works as a high school music teacher. He plays the piano at his church on Sundays. He calls Hannah every single morning at 7 a.m. just to say good morning because he knows she's getting off her shift and needs to hear a friendly voice before she goes home to her empty apartment. Daniel doesn't remember much about the night their mother died. He was too little. All he knows is what Hannah told him, gently, slowly, over the years, that Mommy got sick in her heart and went to be with the angels, and that Daddy was a bad man who left them. That's the version of the truth Hannah gave him. Because Hannah decided at 13 years old that her little brother would not carry the weight she carried. Not ever. She built a wall around Daniel's heart, brick by brick, with her own bare hands. The reason that wall had to exist in the first place, that was Walter James Bennett, their father. Walter was a quiet man, the kind of man you wouldn't notice in a room. He wore the same brown sweater almost every day. He had soft hands, accountant's hands, never rough, never raised. He spoke softly. He laughed even more softly. Hannah used to climb into his lap when she was little and listen to him explain numbers on his yellow notepad. And even though she didn't understand a single thing he was saying, she loved the sound of his voice. Steady, patient, safe. That was the man she remembered before that Tuesday night. After that Tuesday night, Walter Bennett became something else in her memory. A monster wearing her father's face. The man who must have stood over her mother and done something so terrible that her mother fell to that kitchen floor and never got up again. The man who didn't even stay to bury his wife. The man who didn't come back for his children. The town agreed with her, the police agreed with her, even her aunt, sweet Aunt Linda, the woman who took them in, who fed them, who held Hannah's shaking shoulders at the funeral, even she would say gently, baby, sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us worst. 20 years of believing that, 20 years of building her entire life on that one truth. Hannah didn't know it yet, but every single thing she believed about that night, every single thing she had ever told her brother, every single brick in that wall she built around Daniel's heart, it was about to come crashing down. And Hannah didn't just believe her father killed her mother, she knew it. There was no doubt in her, there was no question, there was no soft little voice in the back of her mind whispering, "What if you're wrong?" That voice had been silenced a long, long time ago. Because Hannah hadn't just heard about her father's guilt from somewhere else. She hadn't just read it in a police report. She hadn't just been told by her aunt or the neighbors or the news. No, Hannah was the one who saw it. She was the one who told the police. She was the witness on that Tuesday night. The night that changed everything. Hannah was 12 years old. It was around 9 o'clock in the evening. She had gone to bed early because she had a math test the next morning, and her mother had told her gently, "Baby, get some rest. You'll do better with a clear head." Her mother had kissed her forehead. She had tucked the blanket up to her chin. She had whispered, "I love you" to the moon and back, Hannah Bear. That was the last time Hannah ever heard her mother's voice. A few hours later, Hannah woke up. She didn't know why at first. The house was dark. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels wrong in your bones before your brain even catches up. She got out of bed. She walked down the hallway in her bare feet. The wooden floor was cold. She remembers that. She remembers everything about that walk. Even now, 20 years later, she remembers the nightlight in the hallway flickering. She remembers little Daniel's bedroom door being cracked open and hearing his soft little 4-year-old breathing inside. And then she remembers turning the corner into the kitchen. Some images burn themselves into a child's mind so deep that no amount of years, no amount of therapy, no amount of praying can ever wash them out. Her mother was on the floor. Her mother wasn't moving. And standing over her mother, standing right there in the middle of that kitchen, with the light from the open refrigerator washing across his face, was her father, Walter Bennett, in his brown sweater, with his soft accountant's hands, standing over his dead wife. He turned and looked at Hannah. Their eyes met across that kitchen. The look on her father's face was not the look of a man who had just lost his wife. It was not the look of a man crying out for help. It was something else, something colder, something Hannah, even at 12 years old, recognized as guilt. He opened his mouth. He started to say something. "Hannah, baby." "I please." But Hannah didn't wait. She turned and ran. She ran back down that hallway. She grabbed Daniel out of his bed, that sleepy little 4-year-old in his pajamas, and she locked them both in the bathroom, and she dialed 911 with shaking hands. By the time the police arrived, her father was gone. Vanished. His car was missing from the driveway, his wallet was missing from the dresser, he had run, and Hannah, 12 years old, sitting on a cold metal chair at the police station with a scratchy blanket around her shoulders, told them everything, every detail. The brown sweater, the look on his face, the way he stood over her mother's body. She told it clearly. She told it without crying. She told it the way she would later tell doctors about gunshot wounds in the emergency room, calmly, precisely, without flinching. And the detective wrote it all down. He patted her hand. He told her, "Honey, you're the bravest little girl I've ever met." And the whole town agreed. The story spread fast, the way stories do in small Ohio towns. Walter Bennett, the quiet accountant, had finally snapped. Walter Bennett had killed his beautiful wife in their own kitchen. Walter Bennett had looked his own daughter in the eye and then run like a coward into the night. The pastor talked about it from the pulpit. The neighbors talked about it over fences. The kids at school whispered about it in the hallways. Walter became the town's monster, the man you used as a warning to your children. You see, baby, that's what happens when a man's heart goes bad. And Hannah? Hannah became the town's hero, the brave little girl who saved her baby brother. And the brave little girl who stood up in front of police officers and told the truth. The brave little girl who pointed her finger at her own father. For 20 years, that was the story. And Hannah lived inside that story like it was a house she had built with her own 2 hands. Every brick was a memory, every wall was a piece of evidence, every locked door was something she refused to ever open again. She built her whole adult life on top of that house. She became a nurse because she never wanted to feel helpless again. Not the way she felt that night standing in that kitchen. She chose the emergency room because she wanted to be the person who showed up when everything was falling apart. She raised Daniel because she would never, ever let another child in her family be alone the way she had been alone. She didn't date much. She didn't trust men easily. How could she? The first man she ever loved had turned out to be a killer. If your own father can do that, then who in this world can you ever truly trust again? So Hannah lived her quiet, careful, controlled life. She worked her shifts. She called her brother. She visited her mother's grave every single Sunday morning and laid down fresh white lilies, her mother's favorite, and whispered, "I miss you, Mama. I'm taking care of Danny. I promise." And then, 3 weeks ago, the phone call came. A lawyer. A stranger's voice. "Miss Bennett, I'm sorry to inform you that your father, Walter James Bennett, has passed away." Hannah didn't cry. She didn't even sit down. She just said good and hung up the phone. She went to that funeral. She threw that dirt. She whispered those words into that grave. And she walked away believing truly. Believing that the worst chapter of her life was finally closed. She had no idea. She had no idea that the real story hadn't even started yet. And on the other end of that phone was a voice she had buried 20 years ago in her heart and 3 weeks ago in the cold, wet ground. A voice that was about to tell her that everything she thought she knew about that Tuesday night was a lie. The hospital was quiet that night. Too quiet. Hannah was sitting at the nurse's station, sipping her third cup of black coffee, staring at the clock on the wall. It was 2:47 in the morning. Her shift didn't end until 7. She was tired, but she was always tired, that kind of bone-deep tiredness that nurses learn to live inside like a second skin. And she had just finished stitching up a teenager who'd put his hand through a window. She was finally about to sit down for a real break. That's when her phone buzzed against the metal counter. Unknown number. Hannah stared at it for a long second. Something in her chest tightened. She didn't know why. Call it a nurse's instinct. Call it a sister's instinct. Call it the small, quiet voice we all have inside us that knows when something bad is coming, even before our brain catches up. She picked it up. She held it to her ear. She didn't speak. And then the voice on the other end said her name. Hannah. One word, just her name, but her hand started shaking so badly that she almost dropped the phone. Because she knew that voice. She had spent 20 years trying to forget that voice. She had heard that voice in her nightmares more times than she could count. That voice used to read her bedtime stories. That voice used to hum along to her mother's church songs in a quiet kitchen on a Tuesday night. That voice belonged to a dead man. "Who is this?" Hannah whispered. Her own voice came out smaller than she wanted. Younger, like a 12-year-old girl again. There was a long pause on the other end. A breath, a trembling old man's breath. "Hannah Bear, it's Daddy." Nobody in this world had ever called her that except her mother and her father. Nobody. Not Daniel, not Aunt Linda, not a single friend, not a single soul in 32 years on this earth. That nickname had died on that kitchen floor 20 years ago. Hannah's knees buckled. She had to grab the edge of the counter to stay standing. And the other nurse at the station, a young woman named Carla, looked over with worried eyes and mouthed, "Are you okay?" Hannah couldn't even nod. She stumbled into the empty break room and shut the door behind her. "You're dead," Hannah said into the phone. Her voice was shaking now. "You're dead. I buried you 3 weeks ago. I threw dirt on your coffin. You are dead." The old man on the other end of the line started to cry. Soft, broken, the kind of crying that comes from a place so deep inside a person that you know they have been holding it in for years. "Baby, I had to," he whispered. "I had to make them think I was dead. They were getting too close. They were going to find me. And if they found me, they were going to find you. And Daniel." "Who?" Hannah said. "Who, Walter? Who is they? You're a killer. You are the bad man. There is nobody coming after us except you. Hannah, please, please just listen to me. I did not kill your mother. I have been trying to tell you for 20 years. I have been hiding for 20 years because the people who killed her are still out there, and they have been watching you and your brother since the day it happened. They let me take the blame because it was easier. Because a runaway husband is a clean story. Because a 12-year-old girl pointing her finger was all the proof they needed." Hannah laughed. She actually laughed. A short, sharp, ugly laugh that had no joy in it at all. "I saw you," she said. "I saw you standing over her body. I saw your face. I was there, Walter. Don't you dare. Don't you dare call me after 20 years and try to rewrite what I saw with my own 2 eyes. Hannah, I came home and found her like that. I was trying to check her pulse. I was trying to wake her up. And then you walked in, baby, and I knew the moment you saw me what it looked like. I knew nobody would believe me. I had 30 seconds to decide. I could stay and go to prison for something I didn't do and leave you and Daniel alone in the world, or I could run and try to find out who really did this and one day come back and prove it. I made the wrong choice, Hannah. I have lived with the wrong choice every single day of my life. Please, just meet me. Just one time. Just 1 hour. And if you still don't believe me, I will walk away forever and I will never call you again. Hannah was crying now, real tears, the first real tears she had cried in 20 years, and she hated him for it. She hated him for breaking the wall. She hated him for making her feel like that 12-year-old girl again, scared and small in a cold kitchen. No, she said, no, you stay dead. You stay buried. Don't you ever call me again. And she hung up. She sat in that break room for a long time, shaking. She didn't tell Carla. She didn't tell anybody. By the time her shift ended at 7, she had almost convinced herself it was a prank. Some sick stranger who had read about her father's death in the local paper. Some cruel joke. She drove home. She showered. She slept badly. For 4 days, she did not answer any unknown numbers. She told herself it was over. She told herself she had handled it. She told herself the voice on that phone was not her father, and then on the 5th day, at 11:42 in the morning, her phone rang again. But this time it wasn't an unknown number. This time, it was the hospital, not her hospital, a hospital 2 hours away, in the city where Daniel lived, where Daniel taught music to high school kids, where Daniel played piano at his little church on Sundays. Hannah picked up the phone, and the voice on the other end was a stranger, calm and professional, the way Hannah herself sounded when she had to make these calls. "Mom, I'm calling about a Daniel Bennett. You are listed as his emergency contact. There has been an accident, a hit and run. He's in critical condition. You need to come right away." Hannah dropped the phone. She didn't even hang up. She just dropped it on the kitchen floor and ran to her car in her pajamas, her keys shaking so badly in her hand that she scratched the paint trying to get them in the door. She drove those 2 hours like a woman possessed. She blew through stop signs. She prayed out loud. She begged God, please, please, not Daniel, not my baby brother. Please, you took everything else. Please don't take him too. She made it to the hospital in 1 hour and 40 minutes. Daniel was unconscious, tubes in his nose, a breathing machine pumping his chest up and down. His left leg was broken in 3 places. His face was so swollen, Hannah almost didn't recognize him. The doctor told her, gently, the way Hannah herself had told 100 families before, that the next 24 hours would tell them everything. Hannah sat by his bed. She held his hand. She whispered, "I'm here, Danny. I'm here, baby. Big sister is right here." And that's when the police officer walked in. He was young, mid-20s. He had his hat in his hands. He looked uncomfortable. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry to bother you, but we need to ask you some questions. Because this wasn't a regular hit and run." Hannah looked up. Her eyes were red. Her hands were still holding her brother's hand. "What do you mean?" The officer glanced at the door. Then he looked back at her. "Mom, the witnesses say the car came from down the street, sped up when it saw your brother in the crosswalk, and aimed straight for him. The driver waited for him. This was not an accident, Mom." Hannah felt the air leave her lungs. "Somebody tried to kill your brother." And in that moment, Hannah remembered the voice on the phone, the trembling, broken voice of a dead man. "They are still out there. They have been watching you and your brother since the day it happened." Her hand started to shake again. Her whole body started to shake. Because for the first time in 20 years, the wall she had built around her certainty cracked. Just a little, just a hairline crack. That's all it takes. One crack, one single crack, and the whole house starts to come down. Hannah pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. She scrolled through her recent calls. She found the unknown number from 5 nights ago. She pressed call back. The phone rang twice, and then that voice, that old, broken, trembling voice answered. "Hannah?" She couldn't speak at first. She was sitting in the hospital chapel, the only quiet place she could find, the soft yellow light of a stained glass window falling across her face. Her brother was 3 floors above her, fighting for his life, and she was about to talk to a ghost. "Somebody tried to kill Daniel," she whispered into the phone. "Somebody ran him down in the street, on purpose." There was a long silence on the other end. And then the old man, her father, let out a sound that wasn't quite a word and wasn't quite a sob. It was the sound of a man whose worst fear had just come true. "Oh, God. Oh, baby, no. No, no, no. I told you. I told you they were still watching." Walter, Hannah said, I need you to tell me everything, right now. No more games, no more pieces. Everything. Or I swear to God, I will hang up this phone and I will never speak to you again. And whatever you have been carrying for 20 years, you will carry it to your real grave. He told her where to come. A small diner, 2 towns over, off the highway. The kind of place truck drivers stop at 3 in the morning. Hannah told the night nurse she would be back in 4 hours. She kissed her unconscious brother's forehead. She got back in her car, and she drove. She didn't recognize him at first. The man sitting in the back booth was small, bent, grey hair so thin you could see the pink of his scalp underneath. His hands were liver-spotted and shaking around a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking. He was wearing a brown sweater. And when he looked up and saw her standing in the doorway, his eyes filled with 20 years of tears he had never been allowed to cry. Hannah, he whispered. She didn't sit down. She just stood at the edge of the booth with her arms crossed, her face hard, her heart pounding so loud she was sure he could hear it. Talk. And so he did. He told her that he had come home that Tuesday night a little earlier than usual, and he had been walking up the driveway when he saw a car pulling away from the back of the house. A car he recognized. He didn't think much of it at first. He went inside. He called out for his wife. She didn't answer. He walked into the kitchen. And he found her on the floor. He dropped to his knees. He tried to find a pulse. He shook her shoulders. He begged her to wake up. He saw the bruises on her neck, the shape of fingers, and he knew at that moment that someone had done this to her. Someone had been in his house. And then he heard a sound behind him, a small sound. A bare foot on a wooden floor. He turned around, and there, standing in the doorway, was his 12-year-old daughter. Her eyes were huge. Her face was white as paper. He opened his mouth to tell her to run, to call the police, to get her brother and lock the door. But before he could say a single word, he saw it on her face. He saw her looking at him, kneeling over her mother's body. He saw her deciding what she was seeing. And he knew. He knew that no jury, no police officer, no judge in this world would ever believe a quiet accountant over his own 12-year-old daughter. He knew that the killer had set him up perfectly, left him standing alone over the body, with no alibi, with the only witness being a child who would tell exactly the story they wanted her to tell. Walter had 30 seconds to make a choice. He could stay, go to prison for the rest of his life, and leave his children in the care of a system that would chew them up and spit them out separately. Or he could run, disappear, spend the rest of his life trying to prove who really did this, and one day come home. And he chose to run. Who? Hannah whispered. She was crying now. She couldn't help it. Her voice was breaking. Who killed her, Walter? Whose car was in the driveway? The old man across from her took a long, shaking breath. He reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small, faded photograph. He slid it across the table. Hannah looked down. It was a picture of her mother, smiling, holding a baby Hannah herself. And next to her, with her arm wrapped around her sister's shoulders, was a younger, prettier, softer version of a woman Hannah had seen every single day of her childhood after that Tuesday night. A woman who had packed her lunches. A woman who had braided her hair. A woman who had held Hannah's shaking shoulders at the funeral and whispered, "Baby, sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us worst. Aunt Linda." "And no," Hannah whispered. "No, no, 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 Walter, no, she raised us. She took us in. She gave us a home. She killed her own sister, Hannah," Walter said, his voice cracking, "for money. For an inheritance your mother was about to receive from your grandfather's estate. $600,000. Linda was drowning in debt. She had 2 failed marriages. She had nothing. Your mother had everything. And your mother was about to become rich. So Linda came over that night to talk. And when your mother said no, when your mother said the money was for her children's college, for your future, Hannah, for your future, Linda put her hands around her sister's throat and she squeezed until your mother stopped breathing. Hannah's mouth was open, no sound was coming out. And then she left, and then I came home. And then you came down the hallway. And the rest, baby, the rest is 20 years of a woman raising you and your brother as her own, knowing every single morning when she made you breakfast, every single night when she tucked Daniel in, every single Sunday when she took you to your mother's grave and laid down white lilies knowing that she was the reason your mother was in that ground." Hannah grabbed the edge of the table. She thought she was going to be sick. The diner was spinning. The yellow lights were too bright. Her ears were ringing. 20 years of believing. 20 years of hating the wrong person. 20 years of being held in the arms of the woman who killed her mother. 20 years of saying I love you, Aunt Linda, into the same phone she had just used to call her father. And then a thought hit her so hard she had to close her eyes. Daniel. Daniel was in a hospital bed 3 floors above an empty chapel. Daniel had been run down in the street. Daniel had been aimed at. And just last week, Daniel had told Hannah on their morning phone call that he had finally gotten around to opening that old box of their mother's things. The box Aunt Linda had kept locked in the attic for 20 years. The box she had given to Daniel, only Daniel, on his last birthday. Daniel had told Hannah, laughing, "Sis, you won't believe it. Mum kept a journal, a real journal. I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to this weekend. Maybe we'll finally know who she really was." Hannah's eyes flew open. She grabbed her phone. She called Daniel's hospital room. The night nurse picked up on the 3rd ring. "This is Hannah Bennett. I need you to do something for me right now. I need you to lock my brother's hospital room door. Do not let anyone in, not family, not friends, especially not a woman in her late 50s with silver hair who says she's his aunt. Do you understand me?" "Nobody." The nurse paused. "Ma'am, your aunt is already here. She just signed in 10 minutes ago. She's sitting with him right now." Hannah didn't remember running out of the diner. She didn't remember the bell above the door ringing. She didn't remember her father calling her name. She didn't remember her keys hitting the concrete of the parking lot, or picking them up, or jamming them into the ignition with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. What she remembered was the sound of her own heartbeat in her ears as she tore down that highway at 90 miles an hour. I'm with her phone pressed against her face, screaming at the night nurse, "Get her out of his room. Do you hear me? Get that woman out of his room right now." "Ma'am, I can't just. She is not his aunt. She is the woman who killed his mother. Get her out." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, the kind of pause that happens when a stranger realizes they are no longer dealing with a hysterical family member, but with something much, much worse. "I'm calling security," the nurse said. "Stay on the line, Ma'am. Stay on the line." But Hannah didn't stay on the line. She dropped the phone on the passenger seat. She gripped the wheel with both hands. She prayed harder than she had ever prayed in her life. "God, please, please, you took my mother, you took my father. Please, don't you take Daniel too. Not him, not him, not him." She made it back to the hospital in 57 minutes. She didn't wait for the elevator. She took the stairs. 3 floors, 2 at a time, her nurse's shoes squeaking against the polished floor, her chest burning, her eyes wild. She burst through the door of Daniel's room, and there she was. Aunt Linda, sitting in the chair right next to Daniel's bed, silver hair pulled back in a soft bun, reading glasses on the end of her nose, a worn leather book open in her lap. Daniel's mother's journal. The journal Linda had kept hidden in an attic for 20 years. The journal that must have, somewhere on its pages, named the person who had come over that night. Linda looked up calmly. She smiled, the way she always smiled, soft, warm, grandmotherly. "Hannah, baby, you scared the nurses half to death. They tried to make me leave. I told them I have been this boy's mother for 20 years, and You stop talking." Hannah's voice was so cold, the room felt 10 degrees colder. She closed the door behind her. She locked it. She stood with her back against it. "You put that journal down, you stand up, and you look at me." The smile on Linda's face faltered. Just a little. Just for a second. The way a mask slips an inch and shows the face underneath. "Hannah, sweetheart, what is wrong with you? Have you been drinking? Did something happen?" I said stand up. Linda stood up. Slowly, the journal slid from her lap onto the chair behind her. Hannah took one step into the room, then another. "I just had coffee with my father," she said. The color drained from Aunt Linda's face. In 1 second, like somebody had pulled a plug. She didn't say anything. She didn't even try to lie. She just stood there, frozen. Her mouth slightly open. Her eyes went somewhere far away. Somewhere 20 years and 1 Tuesday night ago. "He told me everything," Hannah whispered. "He told me about the inheritance. He told me about your debts. He told me about your car in our driveway. He told me how you put your hands around my mother's throat in our kitchen and you squeezed until she stopped breathing." Linda's lips trembled. "And then," Hannah said, taking another step, "he told me how you let me, a 12-year-old girl, point my finger at my own father and send him running into the night for 20 years. Hannah was crying now, but her voice was steady, the way a nurse's voice is steady when she is holding pressure on a wound. "Tell me he's lying, Linda. Tell me my father is lying. Tell me right now. And I will walk out of this room, and I will believe you, the way I have believed you my entire life. Tell me he's lying." There was a long, long silence, and then Aunt Linda did something Hannah did not expect. She didn't cry, she didn't beg, she didn't fall to her knees. She straightened her back, she lifted her chin, and she looked Hannah dead in the eyes. "I gave you a better life than he ever could." Hannah felt those words hit her chest like a hammer. She actually stepped back. Her hand reached behind her for the door just to keep herself standing. "What did you say to me?" "You heard me." Linda's voice was calm now, cold. The mask was off completely. The grandmotherly softness was gone, and underneath it, Hannah saw for the first time in her entire life what her mother must have seen in that kitchen 20 years ago. "Your father was nothing, Hannah. He was a quiet little man who did other people's taxes. He would have raised you in that same little house, with that same little life, eating the same little spaghetti dinners on the same Tuesday nights, until you turned into your mother. Soft, trusting, stupid. Don't you talk about her. Your mother was going to give that money to you. $600,000 for your college. Can you imagine? She had a sister who was about to lose her house, a sister who had spent her whole life cleaning up after her, a sister who had nothing. And she was going to spend it all on a child who would have been just fine without it." Linda's voice cracked, but not with sorrow, with anger, 20-year-old anger. "I came over that night to ask her, Hannah, to beg her, and she told me no. She told me her children came first, her children, as if I wasn't her family too. So you killed her. I made a choice, the same way your father made a choice, the same way you are about to make a choice." Hannah's breath caught in her throat, and that's when Linda's hand moved, slowly, toward the leather journal on the chair. The journal that, Hannah realized in that very second, must contain the only written proof of what happened that night. "Don't you touch that book," Hannah whispered. "Sweetheart," Linda said softly, picking it up anyway, "you have a brother in that bed who is barely breathing. You have a father who is a fugitive. You have a life and a job and a future. And I have a lighter in my purse and 20 years of practice cleaning up messes." She smiled, that same warm grandmotherly smile. "Walk away, Hannah Bear. Walk away from this room, and I will disappear, and nobody else will ever get hurt. We can pretend this conversation never happened, the way we have pretended for 20 years. Hannah opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say a single word, the door behind her clicked. It clicked because somebody on the other side had quietly used a hospital staff key to unlock it. The door swung open, and there, standing in the doorway in his brown sweater and his thin grey hair and his shaking liver-spotted hands, was Walter James Bennett, the dead man, the man Hannah had buried 3 weeks ago, the man who had run for 20 years. He looked at Hannah, he looked at Daniel in the bed, and then, slowly, he looked at Aunt Linda. And for the first time in his quiet, gentle accountant's life, Walter Bennett's eyes were not soft. They were fire. "Hello, Linda," he said. Linda staggered backward like she had been struck. The journal fell from her hands and hit the floor with a heavy thud. "Walter, you took 20 years from me," he said quietly. "You took my wife. You took my children. You took my name. You let a town call me a monster. You let my own daughter throw dirt on my coffin." He stepped into the room. He closed the door behind him. "But you are not taking my son." And in that moment, in that small, sterile hospital room, with the heart monitor beeping softly behind them, and a 20-year-old journal lying on the floor between them, and a young man in a hospital bed unconscious through all of it, 20 years of grief, 20 years of lies, 20 years of a family torn into pieces, all of it collapsed into one single room. And nobody, not Hannah, not Walter, not Linda, not even family watching this story right now, knew which one of them was going to walk out of that room alive. For a long moment, nobody in that hospital room moved. 3 people, 3 lifetimes of pain. One unconscious young man in the bed between them, breathing softly through a tube, completely unaware that his entire history was being rewritten in the air above his head. Hannah looked at her father, really looked at him. For the first time in 20 years, he was smaller than she remembered, older than she had been ready for. There was a tremor in his hands that had not been there when she was a child. There was a thin white scar above his left eyebrow that he had not had on that Tuesday night. 20 years of running had carved itself into his face, line by line, grey hair by grey hair. And this was not the monster she had built in her mind. This was a tired old man who had loved her so much that he had given up his own life to try to save hers. And then she looked at Aunt Linda, the woman who had braided her hair before her first day of 7th grade. The woman who had taught her how to bake her mother's apple pie from a recipe card written in her mother's own handwriting. The woman who had sat in the front row at Hannah's nursing school graduation, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, whispering, "Your mama would be so proud of you, baby." The woman who had killed her mother. Linda was breathing fast now. Her eyes darted toward the door, toward the window, toward the journal on the floor. She was a cornered animal, and Hannah, the nurse, the protector, and the woman who had spent her entire adult life learning how to read the small signs of a body about to make a desperate move, saw it before Linda did. "Don't," Hannah said softly. Linda lunged for the journal. Hannah was faster. She crossed that room in 2 steps and put her foot down on the leather cover with enough force to make the floor shake. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She just looked down at the woman who raised her, who was now half bent over and reaching for the only piece of evidence that could put her behind bars. "Sit down, Linda." "Hannah, baby, please." "Sit down." And Linda, for the first time in 20 years, did exactly what Hannah told her to do. She sank into the chair next to Daniel's bed, slowly, like a woman who had finally run out of road. Hannah reached behind her without looking. She pulled out her phone. She dialed 3 numbers, 911. She held the phone to her ear, and her voice did not shake. Not once. "This is Hannah Bennett. I'm at St. Vincent's Hospital, 4th floor, room 412. I need police officers up here right now. I am holding a woman who has just confessed to murdering my mother 20 years ago and to attempting to murder my brother 3 days ago. Her name is Linda Marie Howard. Please hurry." She hung up. The room was so quiet you could hear Daniel's heart monitor. Steady, beeping, alive. Linda started to cry. Real crying this time, not the cold, calculating mask, not the grandmotherly performance, just a 60-year-old woman crying because she finally understood that there was no charm left in her, no story left to tell, no niece left to fool. "Hannah," she whispered, "please, please don't do this. I raised you. I raised you. Doesn't that count for anything?" Hannah looked at her for a long, long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was so soft it almost broke. "It counts for everything, Linda. That's why this hurts so much, because every good memory I have of being loved as a child has your face in it. Every birthday cake, every scraped knee, every nightmare you sat with me through. You were the only mother I had after you took my real one. And I am going to carry that, all of it, for the rest of my life. The love and the lie, together. Forever." She took a slow breath. "And that is exactly why I cannot let you walk out of this room. Because a woman who can love a child she orphaned is a woman who can do anything. And I will not let you near my brother. Not now. And not ever again." The footsteps came down the hall a minute later, heavy, fast. Hannah opened the door. 2 officers walked in. They looked at the old woman in the chair. They looked at the old man in the brown sweater. They looked at the young woman whose hands were finally completely steady. "That's her," Hannah said, pointing at Linda. "And this man," she pointed at Walter, and her voice cracked just a little. "This man is my father. He has been falsely accused for 20 years. There is a journal on the floor. Please, please be careful with it. It is the only thing my mother left behind." They led Linda out in handcuffs. She did not look back. She did not say goodbye. The grandmotherly mask was gone forever, and in its place was the face of a woman walking finally into a cell she had earned 20 years too late. When the door closed behind her, Hannah turned to her father. He was standing by Daniel's bed. He had his hand resting, just barely, on his son's swollen, bandaged knuckles. He was crying without making a sound, the way men of his generation cry, quietly, apologetically, as if even their tears are afraid of taking up too much space. Hannah walked to him. She did not speak. She just stood next to him, and after a long moment, she did something she had not done since she was 12 years old. She put her head on her father's shoulder. Walter Bennett, the dead man, the running man, the falsely accused man, broke down completely. He held his daughter for the first time in 20 years. He smelled her hair. He whispered Hannah Bear into the top of her head over and over and over again. Or like he was trying to make up for every single bedtime story he had not been there to read. "I'm sorry, baby," he kept saying. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know, Daddy," she whispered back. "I know. Family, let me ask you something. Could you do what Hannah did? Could you forgive a father who let you grow up hating him, even if it was to save your life? Could you press charges against the woman who packed your school lunches just because she was also the woman who killed your mother? Could you stand in one single hospital room and choose, in the same breath, mercy and justice? Because that is what Hannah did. She did not pick one, she picked both. She forgave the man who had been wrongly buried, and she handed over the woman who had been wrongly trusted. She understood, finally, in a way most of us never get to understand, that love and truth are not always wearing the same face. Sometimes the people who comfort you are not the ones telling you the truth.